One good interview deserves another. Next on Polygamy, what love is this? She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith. All of them, including plural marriage, especially plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age. But she fled. She ran away. She preferred an eternity of outer darkness to a life of polygamy. She chose hell over religious enslavement. That girl was me. After I fled, I thought I was free, but I realized I wasn't free. I was lost, alone, desolate. No home, no hope, no life. Then Jesus Christ found me and rescued me, and He loved me. In His love, I found real freedom, a real home, a real life. And Jesus offers you the very same thing. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. He has been a refuge for me, and He can be for you too. Knowing the surpassing love of Jesus Christ today, this is why I can look back and ask, polygamy, what love is this? Welcome to our show tonight. This is Polygamy, What Love Is This? And I am your host, Doris Hanson. And this is a weekly television show where we present the other side of polygamy, the side that has been hidden from the public ever since Joseph Smith took his first roll in the hay with his first plural wife, Fanny Alger, and Emma caught them in the act as she peeked into the barn. And ever since that event, Mormon polygamy has been kept a mysterious and secretive practice, and we want to help expose it. And on June 13th, last month, we broadcast an interview that we had with two ladies who had escaped from the Kingston polygamy group a few years ago. And the interview was over before we knew it. We didn't get through all of the questions, only about half of them were covered. And so they graciously agreed to come back for a second interview so that we could get through all of the questions, and hopefully we will tonight, talking about their life growing up in the Kingston group and some of the practices. You know, it's very courageous of these women to talk about some of their experiences, and don't forget that when any of us escape from a polygamy group, it generally takes a lot of bravery to even talk about the things that we had been previously threatened to never talk about. And so to get into another interesting, revealing, and heart-wrenching interview, let me introduce our special guests. First, I would like to introduce Nicole. She was born and raised in the Kingston group. She left the group despite all of their threats that she could never be happy outside the group, and she is now happy and happily married. Welcome again, Nicole. Thank you. Thanks for coming back. And next, I would like to introduce Jessica. She tried to run away from her polygamist home and family 3 times since the age of 8 years old, and she finally made it out safe and permanently, and was eventually legally adopted by a family outside of the polygamy group, a family who truly loves her. I'd like to welcome Jessica.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, both of you.
Thank
We've
you
got
very
lots of good stuff to talk about. And as many of our viewers know, I also was born and raised in the Kingston polygamy group. And as we go through our discussion tonight, you may hear different names that we use as we refer to the group. One name might be the co-op because it was organized as a cooperative society. Another name might be the order. In fact, most insiders refer to it as the order because it was a united order patterned after what Joseph Smith and Brigham Young taught. Of course, that's only really religious communism. And then, of course, the Kingston clan, but mostly the media refers to it as the Kingston clan. But any of those designations refers to the group that we're talking about, the Kingston group. So, last interview, I want to visit a little bit before we go on to the new questions. Last time we talked to you, I asked you both, how many siblings do you have? And one of you asked me, alive or dead? And as I was thinking of that, I thought we need to go into this a little more deeply. What did you mean by alive or dead? And do you have a lot of dead siblings?
I think that was me.
Okay.
And it's because sometimes, I don't know if it's because they're inbred or because they're not getting the proper prenatal care or what, but sometimes babies don't live. They're either stillborn, born and only live for a few hours, few days. They have a few accidents, like one baby had drowned in the bathtub. Just a lot of things. Fell out of a high chair, got ran over by a car. There's so many kids, they can't keep track of them.
Yeah.
So it's just, I think inbred has a lot to do with it, and lack of prenatal care.
And we're going to talk about inbreeding a little bit later on to the show, but that's a very good point. So how many, you told us how many living siblings you had. How many have passed on?
They don't like to talk about they don't like to talk about that as much, and so they don't really, like, nobody really knows.
You don't really know?
Yeah, we don't. Unless they're older than like the age of 1, we know about it. But I think Paul had a wife who, she was pregnant, and she was super, super pregnant, and you knew that she was going to deliver soon, and then it seemed like you saw her like a week later, and you're like, when's the baby due? She's not pregnant anymore, and no one heard anything about the baby. So it's like, what happened to this baby? And I think the baby didn't make it, but I don't know if you remember that.
And all the babies are born at home, so if the baby's born at home, nobody really knows what happens to the birth.
They'll actually, if they come stillborn, then they'll actually just bury them in the backyard.
Yeah. Then they don't have to report it to the state.
So nobody knows. So you don't even know how many siblings you've got that may have died before. That's sad.
I know that they do have some more recently are having their babies in the hospital. Some are being more adamant about that, but
Good.
Not our parents.
Good. You talked last time, and I really am not sure if I should revisit this, but I thought I would anyway, that you were repeatedly raped by a gang of younger boys while from the ages 4 and 5 to 14, I think. And there was a lot of people that asked me questions about that, and some of the questions were, what happened to them? Were they ever punished for what they did to you? If so, what was done? If not, why not?
They were given a wife so that they would have somebody else to abuse.
That was their punishment, to get a wife.
I honestly am not exactly sure what happened. I mean, I was so young in the first part of all that to know what happened to them. And I just know that they do know something happened, because I know that an adult did walk in on it. And I know that I felt like I was in trouble. And I'm not exactly sure what happened to them. I haven't seen the boys since I've left the order. And I know that as I got older, people who were involved with stuff like that when I got older, they were married off, or some of them were already married. And so, and there was a time where my mom drove up to the car, and I was in the car with a man who was already married, and she just had me get out of the car, and she I guess saved me from the situation by taking me home. But at the same time, she was upset with me like it was my fault, and this man was over the age of 40, so obviously, and I'm here 14. And so I guess in their mind I was being the seductive one, but now being an adult I realize how they play it. Like
how they do play it. It's always
the
your
women
fault.
are the ones causing all the problems. They're the sexual creatures or whatever. And so,
were either of you sexually molested by older men?
Yeah,
not just the younger man, but sexually molested by. So he's sexually molested.
That was the one I was just referring to in the car. That the man was over 40.
But there was an actual event where he raped you.
Not fully to that extent, no.
Okay.
But yes, sexually molesting was very much part of it.
A few weeks ago, I received a call asking if we had helped a particular person, young girl who had run away from the Kingston Polygamy group, and we hadn't helped her. I was not aware of the situation, but later discovered that this girl is now in protective custody by authorities because of abuse by her father. The girl excuse me, is underage, and so obviously we can't divulge any names. But Nicole, you've got some information, a little bit of information about the alleged abuse of this girl?
Yes, in fact, I received a call about the young girl probably a couple of weeks ago, and was looking, and I decided to look for her and see what I could find out, and I checked with a couple of my resources, and nobody I could find had her. And then I had one girl call me back, and she said, well, here's where she is, and I can't really tell you how I know this, but it sounds like they took her into protective custody because her father broke a couple of her bones, and they're afraid for her to go back.
They broke her leg and her arm and her nose. Was this because she refused to get married, do you think?
I was under that impression, but
She refused.
yeah.
So there you are, folks. This happens every day in polygamy groups. And the odd thing about all of this is that polygamy groups continue onward, you know, strutting forward into mainstream society, trying to be validated, and yet they protect these people who are abusing them. It should be made public that this man is and has abused his daughter. Okay, we ended our last interview with a question I had asked you if you both had birth certificates. And I think you both said yes, but we didn't get a chance to discuss it very much. So let's get into that just a little bit. You both have a birth certificate. I didn't, by the way, until 1995. I did not have a birth certificate. And obviously, I wasn't born in 95. But I wasn't legal until then because I didn't have one. So many people my age in my age group did not have birth certificates, but you did?
Yeah.
Was your real father's name on the birth certificate?
No.
Nope.
What name was on yours?
Michael Foster.
Does he exist?
It sounds like a popular name, so I think he exists. I never met him,
But not
though.
as your father.
Yeah. I think he exists somewhere, but he's probably in the phone book, but I've never met him, and he probably doesn't know I exist either, so.
And he probably doesn't know your mother exists
Yeah,
either.
he probably doesn't know her either.
Who's your father on your first birth certificate?
Mine is James Allen, and apparently he was born in Montana, and he lives in Montana now. I think he's a coal miner.
Yeah? And so all of these are actually just stories they make up about a mythical person to hide the fact that they are having polygamous children, right? But they are giving out birth certificates to the babies when they're born. Are they doing that?
No, they wait till they're 1.
They wait until they're 1 just in case of a death or something so they don't have to report it.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes if a mom is very adamant about it, because some moms know that's why they're not getting a birth certificate, and so they're like, no, like absolutely we're getting a birth certificate, and I know moms that have threatened to sue for child support for the child, and they're like, no, I'm getting a birth certificate. And in those cases, extreme cases, very rare cases, then they will let them get a birth certificate before that, but they won't like do social security numbers or anything until the kids
they're
are
1 year
Or
old.
even for like state benefits, like if they need I don't know, they don't really need insurance because they don't go to the doctor, but if they need like food stamps or cash assistance and stuff, they can give the children the birth certificate so that they can take the necessary steps to get that assistance.
Get the help that they need.
But it's hard because as the women, they probably really do need that assistance. The men don't. But the women, I mean, the men are withholding the money, so they probably really do need the state assistance.
Yeah, they hold the purse strings, that's for sure. Well, it's against the law to falsify a legal document, I believe.
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
And a birth certificate's a legal document. And just like...
But if you're a numbered man, you don't have to follow the law. Just teasing.
Where's the AG's office? We need somebody to look into some of this stuff.
Please do.
Yeah, please do. When I was growing up, we were grilled about lying for the Lord and lying to protect the group. How were you taught? I mean, you may have been taught the same way as me, maybe differently than I was taught. How were you taught about lying to an outsider? And was it a terrible sin to tell the truth to the outsider?
I remember one time, we were sitting in a family meeting. We have these family meetings about once a month. And my dad walked up to one of the young boys. He was about 6 years old. And said, what would you do if somebody came up to you and said, who's your dad? And he was like, and he knew who his dad was at that time. And he said, well, my dad's name is Paul. And my dad smacked him across the head. He said, that is not ever what you say. You say, talk to my mom. You say, I don't know who my dad is. You say something along those lines.
Look on your birth certificate and find out who your dad is.
Yeah, so we were grilled
to lie
in family meeting in front of everybody. And
your father can't even claim his own children. That's despicable. What about you? Do you remember anything particular about lying?
Really similar. And also because we've had so many experiences being in state's custody, then it was also like, what are you going to do if a social worker knocks on your door? And I mean, I was really, really good at it. I don't know if you want to go into a story, but one time specifically, my little siblings, I was watching the 11 kids. 2 of the younger ones were throwing mud at the neighbor. And so the neighbor ended up calling the cops thinking there's not a parent home. There wasn't a parent home. By this point, I was probably maybe 13, maybe 12. I knew that I was legally okay to be home with about 4 kids, no one under the age of 5 to 6, somewhere there. So the cops came. I said, my mom's not home. I am watching kids, but I can't let you in until she comes home. And somebody else was watching us. They just went to this grocery store with the younger kids. I will, if you want to wait outside, I was like, I will call my mom and I'll call them and see who can get here first. So the cops, thinking, okay, cool, this girl's parents taught her good. Yeah. He's waiting outside. I ran inside and we cleaned that house up. We were shoving things inside the stove, inside under the beds. We cleaned it up. It was such a mess. Then I snuck my 2 youngest siblings and a couple other siblings out the window in the backyard, and they went and hid behind this shed and I pretended that we had these 4 people, and my mom and my uncle were going along with it. They didn't know where I hid the kids. And I was 12 doing all of this. And so they really taught us how to lie, really taught us how to deal with those situations. And then they were so proud of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did good. I finally did good.
You did good by being deceitful and making sure they
always
were
we had best meetings. They're like, who's your dad? And if you didn't answer, or you didn't have a good lie, or you couldn't be quick on your toes and be convincing, then you would be smacked. Yeah. And it was just, you're just taught how to deal with social workers.
Not a good way to raise a family, I'm telling you. And they say that polygamy is only for consenting adults. How many tens of thousands of children are really involved in polygamy
groups? I didn't consent to be in polygamy. That's I didn't want to be. If I was going to be born into something crazy, I think I would want to be a gypsy.
But not in polygamy.
Yeah, not polygamy. I didn't consent to that.
Okay, I understand that the Kingston group has what they call marriage preparation classes. And that's for the women, for the girls, females, I should say.
The boys have them too.
Oh, they have them too. It'd be interesting to sneak in on one of their classes. So I take it that you had the classes, you went to them. How old were you when you were first admitted into the class or required to go, and what did they teach you?
Do you remember those?
Yeah, I think that I was about 10 or 11 when I went to the first one. And I went to the first class, and my mom actually afterwards, she was upset that my dad made me go, and she walked me up to him, and I remember her kind of being she's like, why is she in this class? And he's like, because she's getting close to marriage age. And
10
blah,
years
blah,
old.
Blah. Yeah, and so my mom's like, how old do you think she is? And he's like, how old are you? And I think I was 10 or 9. I was young. And she tells him, and he's like, oh. He's like, well, you look you can still go. But he didn't even know my age. I was younger than everyone else that was going.
How could a man with over 100 kids know each kid's age?
It was a good part on my mom's side to
That's good.
It's probably one of the very few times where she stood up and was kind of like, what are you doing to my child?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
You're supposed to start them at 11 or 12. And
Marriage preparation at 11 or 12. What do they teach you in those classes?
They teach you
to be the good wife.
They teach you dinner has to be on the table by 6 o'clock. Your kids all have to be very well groomed, very clean. That's the only time they have to be clean, but they do have to be clean for when he comes home. And they teach you. It's been a long time since I've taken them, but
do they teach you that you can't say no to him at any point? You
Absolutely.
have to obey him explicitly, no matter what.
In fact, I remember one of the girls raising their hand and saying, well, what if you don't want to have sex? And she was a lot older than a lot of us, so I think she'd actually been in this situation. And they said, you are there to please your husband. That is your purpose on earth. That is how you are close to God. You are there to please your husband. You don't say no. And you shouldn't want to say no because you want to have children, you want to bear his children, you want to, So
subservient to the male and have babies. That's the woman's place, right?
One of the things that Daniel said in one of ours is he's like, all right, so some of my boys are going to have to marry some of my girls. And some of my girls will marry some of my boys. And all of us kids just look around please don't be us. And who's it going to be? And we were told, boys and girls can't play in the same room together. And we're like, why? We're siblings. Like, what if you go up and marry each other? And it was just the weirdest thing to be constantly be saying and hearing those things. And now I have my young children, and I'm like, I couldn't even imagine, like, looking at my kids and being like, you guys might marry each other. Like, that is just so weird. And I don't know how they made it so natural, but yeah.
I didn't, like, when I was growing up, in fact, when I was 11 or 12 years old, then my half-sister came to me and she said, so you and I are going to marry our half-brother. Like, she had a half-brother in mind, and we're going to marry him. I'm going to be the 4th wife, you're going to be the 5th wife because your mom's the 5th wife. And so you get to take that number. And she thought it was the coolest thing for me. And I was sitting there like, well, like, I didn't like the first 2 wives already. He was already married twice, 2 or 3 times actually. And I told her, I was like, I don't think I want to marry him. And she's like, well, he's going to be the next leader. You have to marry him. Otherwise, you're not going to go to heaven.
You're not going to be anybody, huh?
And I'm like, I'm 11 years old. Like,
did it bother you that you would, really, something deep inside of you repelled against marrying your own brother?
Yeah.
Even though you
it felt naturally wrong to me.
It was normal for me.
For you, because that's all you knew.
Yeah.
That's
we
all
were
you
only
taught.
allowed to, like, with my dad's family, we were only allowed to hang out with them. Like, that was who we were going to marry. All my sisters knew they were going to marry their half-brothers. Like, that was really big in my dad's family because my dad was a leader. And so, in fact, we were even taught not to marry some of Daniel's kids. Because they weren't good enough. They weren't Paul's
Daniel's kids run away.
Yeah,
I bet he hates that. But you were repelled against it. That's interesting.
Yeah, I found it disgusting, and but the thing is that I didn't think it was disgusting to marry your uncle. I didn't think it was disgusting to marry your cousin. Like if I was to marry someone in Paul's family, but I did in Daniel's family. So
I think Daniel's family was a lot closer than Paul's family was. Like, we only saw, your dad had like outings and stuff all the time. You guys were a closer family. My dad, we saw our half-brothers just as much as we saw her brothers. Like, we weren't a family. We weren't a tight unit. In fact, I remember they used to do mom's dinners where they were trying to get the family together, and it would turn into a catfight every time all the wives were together. They stopped doing mom's dinners.
I thought everyone's family did that.
Okay, well, you were being raised to accept all of these weird things, and polygamy is the weirdest of all, by the way. To share somebody's husband is weird. But were you raised that you must live polygamy and stay in the group in order to go to heaven?
Yes.
In order to please God?
I knew that no matter what, my husband was going to have more than one wife. I just did not know if I would be the first or what number I would be. But that just seemed like there was no other way to think about it. Like, that's all I knew.
Were you taught that God required it, or did you think it was just a lifestyle? Were you taught that God was a polygamist, all those things?
Yeah.
We were taught that if you didn't live it here, because I would ask that question actually, well, why doesn't Brett have 2 wives? And they're like, he's going to live it on the other side because Anna cannot accept it while she's on this earth. And Anna was his first wife. And yeah, so you have to live it if you want to make it to the celestial kingdom.
Would you say in that group that polygamy is a choice, or is it a threat or a coercion?
It's a coercion. It's presented like it's a choice, but it's
a way of life.
It's not a choice.
It's a way of life. It's not like there isn't no, is my husband going to have another wife? It's, this is the guy I'm going to marry, and he pretty much owns me now.
I guess it's kind of like poverty. You know how they say poverty, it's like a community, it's a lifestyle. People that can't get out of it, they're stuck in it, even though it's like, go get a job, just leave it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Polygamy, it's all you know. You know how to live it good.
Yeah.
But if you go out in the real world, you're so lost, and you're socially awkward, and you don't know how to get what you need, and a guy comes up to you, and like you don't know how to say no. You don't get to practice saying no ever. And
you
so
have no boundaries.
Yeah, you have no boundaries. You're just a rag doll, and it's just like, then you go back to polygamy because you're like, out in the world, I'm so exposed, I'm a rag doll. So you go back to polygamy because you know how to survive there, you know how to live there, and you know your boundaries. You know how to play their game and win at their game, but not in the real world where you actually have to make decisions.
I helped someone out of the Kingston group a while back, and I asked her this question, and she said that she didn't even know polygamy was against the law. She just thought it was something you did.
We knew it was against the law. I can assure you that because we were taught to say that we...
Did it bother you that God required something that was against the law? Did that
no, they had an answer for that.
What was the answer?
Sometimes the laws of the land are not in accordance with the laws of God. But if that's
Most
the
of the time,
case,
the laws of the land are not in accordance with
so
the
what
laws
we
of
do
God.
is
Everything they do
we
is
still
illegal.
live it. We just have to be secret about it. We are better than them. And so I looked at me like I was superior to the police officers, to the president of the United States. I'm a part of the, the polygamous group. I'm superior to you. Like,
I
don't tell
don't
me what to
suppose
do.
they showed you the scripture that says that we're supposed to be subservient to the laws of the land, did they? They didn't show you those scriptures.
No.
That God's not to command something that's
they
illegal.
make the Bible available for us to read, but they interpret the whole thing. At that point, why would I read it?
In the process of this ministry and of doing this show, I have received some horrific criticism from Mormons, mainline Mormons, because I refer to Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants as the polygamy doctrine, the polygamy revelation received by Joseph Smith that he says came from God. Growing up under the doctrine of Joseph Smith's polygamy and being taught Section 132, was Smith's revelation given to practice plural marriage as far as you were taught?
We don't really get taught that part of it. When we go to church, we're learning order history. We're not learning the Bible.
You're not learning Section 132 of the Doctrine and Covenants?
Like,
no,
I
we're
remember
learning that
them-
Paul says this, and this is what you do. We're learning the order history, and this is where we started, and this is the...
You're not learning anything about Joseph Smith anymore?
No, we are.
A little bit. Oh, no.
We were when I was younger.
Really?
No, you learn about that in, like, co-op or whatever.
Oh.
They don't,
Not
you don't
in
learn
their
about it in
church, but you learn about it in their other meetings.
Yeah.
I think that, like, I identify LDS now, and so, like, a lot of people do get upset, like, when you compare or put LDS and polygamy together, but that's
where it's all
like,
came from.
I'm there right now, and I understand they reject it now, but that's, that is the history and stuff. So, but they talk about the order's history has a lot to do with some guy. He had a dream or a vision, very similar to Joseph Smith, went up to the mountains, and so he kind of has a
And he left the
story.
LDS.
Yeah, he left LDS, and somebody big high up in the LDS said, if we had 5 guys like you, we could still practice polygamy. And so this guy was like, okay, well, I'll get 5 guys. Like, started
I
his
never
own
heard
group.
that one before.
And that's, I think, where the numbers come from.
It
number
is,
1,
yeah.
and then the number 5, like all the way up came in, and they have the numbered men now. Like they're in line, they line up to be God's people or something.
Yeah, my father had a number for sure. Someone said that it was customary for a girl to plan for 2 weddings.
Definitely.
A wedding if you were going to be a first wife, and a wedding if you were going to be a plural wife. Did you?
I always assumed I was going to be a second wife. I never thought I would
Just a
be.
given, huh?
I didn't think I got that choice.
I planned 2 weddings. I remember very distinctively being really young, probably even 8 or 9, and just being really young and at a wedding and being behind this chair, just looking at the wedding, sitting there talking to another girl about the same age, and just being like, if I'm the first wife and I get to have this, because you don't have a reception being the second or third. I think they're getting better about doing something small, but back then it was so secretive. It's immediate family, parents, the leader, and that's about it.
It would
not
depend.
even your siblings sometimes.
Sometimes it was just the leader that was marrying you, and then you two. In fact, a lot of times they would go off.
And
It
just
would
so
just
secretive
be-
about it.
It was
and
very
you wouldn't
secretive
even-
when I was there as well.
Yeah,
Very
so
secretive.
I just planned 2 weddings. It was just like, I even started buying wedding stuff once I started hitting about 14, because you heard the stories of this one girl, one of Daniel's wives. She bought everything for her wedding, had her wedding dress. She had everything ready except the groom. And she just knew she was going to get married on this day. And then all of a sudden, Daniel proposes. They get married like 3 days later. But she had everything ready. So I was like, oh, I have to prepare. I have to prepare to be the wife, be the husband. I started buying wedding stuff, thinking, okay, this is my first wedding. Like, if I'm first wife, here's all my stuff. I'm the second wife, here's all my stuff. I started wedding dress shopping and things like that.
So if you're a second wife, all this first wife stuff, wedding plans are just gone.
Yeah, it was too extravagant. It was like there was no one coming to my wedding if I was a second wife. Or third or fourth.
How sad it is. How sad that is. I was lectured by my mother sometimes for hours at a time on polygamy, the joys of polygamy, and how I was supposed to love the idea of it, and that was probably my biggest brainwashing techniques that they use. Others too, but that was probably the biggest, the one I hated the most. Do you remember specific preachings? Were you condemned to be a son of perdition if you didn't do it? Did they teach you those things still like they did when I was still in the group?
I think my mom honestly hated polygamy, and she had a really hard time. In fact, one time I read her notes that she needed to teach us to respect our dad and that we had to love our dad and everything. But she could never teach polygamy because I don't think she liked it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She said, in fact, if I would ask her, she would say, you know, I love the ladies in our family and they have a lot of value to your dad, but she would just get this faraway look, and I really think she hated it with a passion.
And you know how many women are probably just exactly like her? They just hate it, but they don't dare even admit it to themselves.
Yeah.
What about, were you taught you'd be a son of perdition? Did your mother love being a polygamous wife? Do you know?
I was taught to be like that. If I left, I'd be a son of perdition, or things would happen and things like that. But I don't think my mom liked it either. I found some notes. They're gonna now, because they're watching this, they're gonna be like, "Women, don't leave your notes around for your kids to find," because they're just like that. But I did find some letters of hers saying sorry to Daniel, and it seemed like a very deep sorrow. And then since I've left, I've come in contact with my uncle, who his job at 12 years old was to live with my mom the first year of her marriage to make sure she was being good and to make sure that she was staying loyal to Daniel and stuff.
A 12-year-old boy?
Yeah, well, she was 15, so he was only a few years younger than her. And he said that was the hardest year of his life because the abuse he watched my mom go through. And he said that Daniel broke her down. He abused her, and then I was born. I'm the oldest of her children. And he said that after, when I turned 1, he's like, I couldn't do it anymore. He was actually one of the few that was kicked out of the order because he started questioning Daniel and Paul, saying, why is this God's will? Why is God wanting, you know, my sister to suffer like this? And just to hear him talk about that, I was like, I'm so sorry for my mom, but it gives me some hope that, you know, she used to be, you know, a Spitfire. She used to, she used to be in there, in her body, and just fighting for her, what she wanted. And
not anymore, though.
Yeah, I mean, she thinks she is, but she's not.
They do break
She's definitely settled.
That's what it's all about, is become a Stepford wives and just empty inside. And
yeah, and I think they try to teach you to love your husband. And I remember telling my mom that I hate Daniel, and she was like, she would tell me sometimes she has a hard time, but she just lets time pass, and then eventually, you know, everything's okay and stuff like that, and try to tell me how she works through that kind of stuff. So she was trying to give me advice to survive there, not to escape and not to just stand up to it. So.
And you know, it's really too bad because God really, he is the one who planned marriage, and he planned monogamy, and in polygamy, all it does is let the women know, the men, because it's man's command, not God's, for polygamy, let the women know that they're not worthy of having their own husband. That's basically all that they're doing. You're not worthy to have your own husband, but I'm worthy to have many, many wives.
Yeah, no, I honestly thought that I was placed on this earth to be a, you know, like I was just a sexual pleasure for men. Like that was, had looked at myself like an object at point. Like at one
Well,
point in
they
my
are
life.
an object, obviously, and work machine. How do they choose marriage partners? Do you get to have a say in it? Do they choose for you?
That's a good one.
How
It's
does that?
different now since I've left. I hear a lot to do with my case has made things different. So should I say how I was before, and then you can say how it is now? Like before, from my perspective, it was kind of like they say you're choosing it. You have to dream about it and have like direction.
Erection.
Yeah. You wake up and you're like, oh, I dreamed about so-and-so. And I was like so confused because I'm like, oh my gosh, I would just dream about whoever I saw that day. I'm so confused. I'm like, oh, I'm going to marry everyone. And so it's like this puzzle that they're just like putting these stepping stones in front of you, and then they're trying to figure out who you like, who you fit well with, or a numbered man can come and claim you and say you've been claimed. So it's just, if you're not claimed, then it's just so confusing. I just think it's so confusing because they pretend that it's your choice, but there's no way it's your choice.
Well, didn't you say a
think you're
numbered
choosing
man
it.
came and claimed you and said that
Yeah.
you were married in the hereafter, and so you
And
didn't
I
need
was
to worry
thinking
about it
at
now?
the time that I was choosing this man, and that's why it's so confusing because I had gone through that, and I was thinking, okay, this is my number one. I'm choosing him. I want to marry him. I want my salvation. And then leaving now and looking back and being like, wow, I really did not want that. I really, you know, and it's just like looking at all the little things that they like. First, they had this guy help my mom out. They had this guy, I started working for him. He started, you know, like definitely a grooming process. And I was probably 12 when he started being
Grooming
closer in
process,
my
that's
life.
a good word.
And it's like, so yeah, it looked like it was my choice, but he was the only one standing at the end of the road, you know?
And it
What
was kind of
about-
an escape thing for.
Yeah, you escape your father.
You escape the home. What about you? How did you?
When I was 16, my dad sat me down and he said, "It's time for you to get married." So make a list of people that you think you want to marry, and I will come back from China in 2 weeks and we'll talk about it. He came back from China and I said, I don't know, I'm 16. I want to go to school. I want to do other things. I don't want to get married at this time. And he said, well, a young man is going to come forward next week and you need to go talk to him and he's going to propose and then you need to pray about it. So I went on this date with this old guy that I was like, no. And I said, well, I prayed about it and he's not the right one. And he said, okay, another one, here's your other choice. And he
so
made
they
me go on a
parade
date.
the men in front of you and you get to...
Well, no. And then
I
I
go
said,
forward to the dad, right?
yeah. And then after I talked to the other guy, I was like, I don't feel like he's right either. He said, well, take your pick. And I'm like, that way. So then, so that was when I ran away and was like, no, I'm not going to do this at all. Now they actually genetically test them because they've had so many things with Down syndrome, they've had so many problems with genetics, so they'll actually, they have people going to school for genetic engineering, and they will test them and say, okay, these people, like, if you're going to have these two people get married, they'll say, okay, test them. They don't both have this specific recessive gene, but right now all their genes are so recessive that there's no way to weed them out.
Yeah. And that's my next question is the incest. An article in the Salt Lake Tribune on April 25th, 1999, and we have a graphic for this. The headline read at that time, when incest becomes a religious tenet. Mm-hmm. And this happened in the middle. The man in the middle there was J.O. Kingston. He was the leader. He's the father of the leader now. And a picture of all of his wives and then the boys and his kids from the first wife there below. But this was in the Tribune after Daniel had whipped his daughter with 28 times or something like that with his belt. And so they did a huge investigation, and that was part of the investigation was the incest came out. And it goes on, the article goes on to detail some of the incest practices and how it started and how widely it's practiced within the group. Were you taught that the Kingston's bloodline was pure and special, and that's what justified and made incest preferred?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the pure
blood
of Christ.
Clear back to Christ,
yep.
right? Clear back to Jesus.
It actually comes back because Ortel used to, this is a story that I was given. So Ortel used to herd cattle, and he used to breed cattle. And he said, well, if you mix cows that have good bloodlines, then you're going to have powerful people. And so he went on this tangent and was like, okay, so now we're going to mix our bloodlines because we have Jesus' bloodline. And so we're going to take that and we're going to make this bloodline completely pure. And they said, and when I would ask my mom, I said, well, why doesn't anybody else do that? And she's like, well, royalty does it. Like when you have a king and a queen, then they marry their half brothers all the time. And I said, yeah, and they have retarded kids. Yeah. So that was their way to justify it.
And so to tie this in back with the beginning of the show when we talked about some of your siblings who have died, this inbreeding, this incest is the reason for many of the deformities and the infant deaths as a result of that. How far into the inbreeding are they now? Third, fourth generation?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's about
I just
fourth
recently
generation.
heard about one of Daniel's kids marrying another one of Daniel's kids, and what they did for the wedding, they took a picture of the two kids, the husband and wife that were getting married, and then a picture, and so one picture had the wife and Dial and the kids, and the other picture had the wife and Dial and the kids, and they overlapped those pictures. So now Dial is on both ends of this picture, so like photoshopped it. And here's a picture of like the kids getting married, and here's Dial on both sides. He does not have a twin brother, so
yeah, right.
That's just, I don't know, they're being creative. I don't know if they think it's humorous or what it is, but
they find it funny.
They're like Hitler.
They find it fun.
Like he was trying to make the perfect, perfect genes and get those going forward, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But they don't see it that way. They're so.
But anybody who's going to school and studying to be a geneticist, they are going to know there's no way they can do it successfully.
That's why they're to the point where they're genetically testing them now. And I've even sat down with my dad. I said, you are an intelligent person. Everything you're doing is intelligent. It may be wrong, it may be disgusting, but you're intelligent. It's working for you. Why would you do this? And he couldn't honestly answer me. He really believes that he's protecting his bloodline. And I said, you're really good with law, but you are so stupid when it comes to biology. And I mean, that is my favorite subject. And so it's like, I cannot believe that you're that stupid. Like, I just, yeah.
Do they know, or did you ever know while you were in it, do you know if they know that the Bible prohibits a man marrying his sister, his half-sister, his stepsister, or
They don't care.
or the wife of a wife who, the sister's wives is a plural wife, which men do all the time in polygamy groups. They always marry their wife's sisters. All of that's
I
prohibited
never
by
heard
God.
anything about that while I was in the group. I know it now, but I know that they have a way of explaining everything. Their
Of
way
course.
of probably explaining it away is, it was like Moses' law when he came down with the first 10 commandments, and then he had to crush it because people weren't ready for it. So they're like, oh, these are the laws the world's not ready for. Like, they'll explain it away.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that. And when I started studying the Bible on my own, I found verses that proves that that's a lie. What they
Yeah,
miss
they
the
tell you
whole
to
thing.
read the Bible, so like you're like, no, I read it. It doesn't say that, but it's like you're reading the Bible with all the preconceived notions and all the background that they've put in there. So you're reading what you're like. It's almost like you're validating what they've been telling you. You're not looking for something different. You're looking like to validate what they've been saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's very true. I have a quote, and this kind of ties in with what we've talked about already, from someone from the Kingston group a few years ago, and this is what they said. Quote, brothers and sisters are not allowed to be alone together. I heard this is even going for fathers and daughters. It conditions them to be able to marry a brother or sister if asked to do so. It also destroys bonds between family members, therefore giving more control to the leaders. More and more children are being born with severe birth defects from inbreeding. This is bad enough on its own, but it gets worse because the mothers are blamed for the birth defects. This forces them to be better members so that their next inbred baby may be born normal. Does this ring true?
They are allowed to be alone. Brothers and sisters are allowed to be alone if the brother's raping the sister.
Yeah,
It
I
happens
think
quite
it's
frequently.
frowned upon it when the parents are actually able to like notice that it's happening. They say don't do it, and they like like I said before, they said brothers and sisters can't be in a room alone together because what if you marry each other?
Yeah.
But it does happen. I mean, you have more kids than you have adults. So obviously the kids are kind of running the show, and they should just take over. But
I don't know. The way they
then they
treated
could be
you,
Lord
I
of
don't
the
think that's a
Flies.
good idea.
But I don't know. I mean, specifically, I think Rachel Brown's been on the show before. I remember very specific that she had a child who didn't live very long, I think 13 hours or something like that. And I remember during her pregnancy, she was like shamed upon because she kept eating ramen noodles. And she was like, it's what I can keep down. And everybody knows that the ramen, like we're taught, the ramen noodles cause her baby to have its like not an ear or not an eye or something severe to that extent. But I honestly was so afraid to eat ramen noodles when I was pregnant because of the stories from her. And even though I left and I had been to school and I knew that the ramen noodles didn't cause us problem, they still ingrain that into your mind that you are just like, just in case, I'm just going to stay
It's
away
awful
from it.
hard
I
to.
still can't eat ramen noodles.
Yeah, you like
Still
you
have
think that's
never
what
had 'em.
caused this baby to look like this. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, it's probably because she was your half sister. And not only was she your half sister, her parents were also related, and so are yours.
Yeah,
So
and it's all genetics. It's all and it's sad because they do blame the mother, and that causes the mother to be even more subservient to be a better member, so that she will have, and she gets blamed for something that is genetically wrong. How do they provide for your medical and dental needs in the group?
They don't. You stay home when you have
you get a
something.
toothbrush. And
They let you brush your teeth?
and a baking
Yes.
soda.
They didn't let me brush my teeth when I was growing up.
You
You can't use
chew on
fluoride,
eggshells.
though. Yeah.
You don't get to use fluoride, so you get baking soda or like their homeopathic or whatever, and then you eat eggshells a lot. It's supposed to
I
help your
remember
enamel.
that. That's awful.
I do remember going to the
I
dentist
actually liked
though.
the
Actually, my
eggshell.
mom took me to the dentist a couple times, and she paid for it herself. Like we didn't have insurance, so she had to go on the non-insurance plan. So I don't know. Maybe my mom we just lugged out, and she cared enough. But
My mom, I remember because my grandpa he owns a lot of businesses, and he did trade with the dentist a long time ago.
Oh.
And so my mom worked it out so that he would do trade with my grandpa, and they would help my dental work. That's the only way I got braces. Most
the
people
only
aren't
way,
allowed to get
huh?
braces,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
my grandpa, my grandpa, he's not actually my blood grandpa, but he I do have to say he took great care of his family, and he took care of my mom because my dad wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And in fact, most of his sons don't have second wives. Most of his sons have one wife that they take care of very well. In fact, I think only one of his sons, one of his like 10 sons, has a second wife. But I got lucky because he was a big part of my mom's life.
Mm-hmm. So. That's good that you had somebody that cared enough to step in and help. And medical care, did you ever get sick, you needed a doctor, and did they take care of you?
I remember being food poisoning. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, because I was eating the food that was the leftover garbage that was for the pigs, but I got to it first because, that's how they operate.
We were awesome that way.
And I ate it, and the next day I was just throwing up all day. I was so sick, I couldn't even sit up. And I remember Daniel saying, you can either be sick at work or you can be sick at home. Go to work. Like he was just like, get up and tough it out. And I literally could not even get out of the van. I was sleeping in the van, I was sleeping on the floor. Like I couldn't even work. And then I was finally better the next day. So I swear it was food poisoning. They did nothing about it. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's a story about when I was really young. Like my mom had just the 2 kids, and my brother had whooping cough, and he had to go to the hospital, and they were just trying to do blessings and trying to save his life through blessings and prayer. Mm-hmm. And I think my grandpa intervened. Obviously I was too young to remember, but I think my grandpa ended up taking him to the hospital, and it saved his life.
Wow.
But it's things like that.
Wow.
When I broke my collarbone when I was 8 years old, and my mom was like, I was just crying, and my mom was driving all over town trying to get me to my dad. She says, I think it's broken, I don't know what to do. And my dad said, no, she's fine. And so then she called my grandpa, who was taking care of her, who could do trade. And he said, well, let's get her to his house. And he was friends with the doctor, so they took me to the doctor's house. And he's like, this is broken. And so they put on a brace and everything. My dad came to see me, and he started yelling at my mom. He said, I told you to just take her home. I told you not to worry about this.
And you had a broken collarbone.
And I had a broken collarbone. I was in a brace for 6 weeks. And
these guys ought to be thrown in jail and the key tossed. As far as you were able to know as children in your home, did your fathers treat one wife better than the other wives? And do the wives and children know who the favorite wife is?
Yeah, I think we referred to it a little earlier in the show, but we could tell which ones were the favored wives, and usually we were, why are they the favored wives? Why, what's going on? And it was the ones who put out more, the ones who were available for lunchtime quickies, things like that. So
they were much prettier. They were younger and prettier.
So they changed who their favorite wife is then when they...
Yeah, it wasn't always the same, but definitely I knew who the hated wife was. She was the one who stood up for herself. She was the one, who backtalked, the one who got upset when he forgot her birthday, So normal women things.
So what happens when a wife starts to develop a mind of her own? And the older children maybe notice it. Do they tell on her?
They shame her.
They shame her, and they send her away to the middle of nowhere where she's on a ranch by herself.
Yeah, they kind of break her down again. Like she got too strong, so they break her down. They put her on a ranch. They isolate her. They shame her. They cut off her resources, things like that. So
if she ever gets let back into the society of the group, she's humbled and won't do that again. Do any of them ever run away?
I've heard of a few running away. I mean, Luann.
What do they do to them
You don't go back if you run away.
Don't go back.
If you have kids and you run away, you're not going back.
How do they deal with it inside the group and inside the family? Your mother run away, and do they say things like...
I don't know of a mom that's left her kids behind.
Yeah, the moms haven't left their
kids. There's been a few who have wanted to leave and won't leave because they have to leave their kids behind.
Yeah, they won't leave.
I know that.
Yeah, once the kids get married, they won't leave.
Your kids are all you have there. There's no way that you...
I remember my mom saying specifically that she thought that nobody loved her. And so she was so excited to get married because finally somebody would love her. And she got married and she still felt like no one loved her. And so then she was pregnant and she was like, I was so excited to have kids because then somebody would finally love me.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that many times.
I think that's what the kids are to these women. Like, that's why they are having 12, 15 kids. It's the only people in the world that they know that love them.
They need them and love
until
them
they turn, 13 and then they go through a I don't love you stage.
Right. Or if you're a boy, then you get to spy on them and then report back. What about supervision? We've talked about that a little bit. Is there proper supervision of the children, especially with these huge families?
No, that's how they
Especially
get
when
run
the
over by
mother,
cars.
when the mother has to, she has to go out. She's gone from them all day, and they have the oldest child tend them.
I'm not saying that like big families aren't adequate and they can't like, you know, be successful, but I think that there's some sacrifice you make to have a big family, especially when you still have a big family of like 8 to 10 with 2 parents in the home. You're still sacrificing the attention and the one-on-one time and the individual time you get to spend with each kid to individually know them. And you're also sacrificing, like, you know, you go out to eat, you can't go out to eat and let everyone get a $10 meal, because then you're over like $100 for one meal. You just can't live like that. So it's, I mean, there are some doing it outside of polygamy. I don't want to like say that those people can't do it. They're doing it and it's all right, and they're sacrificing for that benefit.
But they don't have a lot of other
polygamy,
wives to deal with. They've only got their one family.
A lot of people think that in polygamy it's kind of like that show Sister Wives, that you've got the one wife that watches the kids and the one wife that does the dishes and the one wife that does this. That's not how it is. Like maybe on Sister Wives, but in our home it was my mom, us kids, and we took responsibility. Like we would washing the dishes. We were the one making the meals and backing the kids. And I remember getting the baby in the middle of the night from my mom.
And the wives are so busy fighting for the attention and acting like high school girls that they're not able to take care of their kids. They want their kids because your kids are going to love you unconditionally. I mean, you're the one that they see every day. But that's not
in reality the way it is.
And the moms, I mean, they love their kids. If they think about it, yes, I love my children. They're not there for their children. They're chasing their peace husband that, yeah.
I got what...
I'm sorry.
Like my mom, she worked early in the morning, and she would come home after dinner. And so even if she wanted to, she couldn't. And so we were at the babysitter, and the babysitter had her own set of 10, and then my mom's got her own set of 10, so this poor babysitter.
And when,
that's why things like sexual abuse happen in these homes.
Because there's no supervision.
There's 20 kids and one mom, you know, in the home. So
Right. Do you believe that a good God who proclaims that He is love and that He loves us would require polygamy for salvation?
No. No.
No.
Did you ever wonder that when you were? I wondered that when I was growing up, and of course I didn't know who the real God was. But
I just thought God was kind of a bastard.
Yeah,
so
I did. I did think He was a horrible person. You identify God to be the way you see your father. So since then, I mean, I've been adopted by a new dad, and he's helped me find a new way to view God. And I just don't see Him being that way. I see Him being loving and wanting us to be happy.
He proclaims Himself, he's in the Bible, as being a loving God with long suffering, patience. He has lots of patience with us, and He never has ever advocated polygamy.
Yeah.
What are the reasons that people won't leave a polygamy group, even though they may want to or maybe might have a chance?
Your whole life.
Brainwashing.
You lose your whole life.
Yeah.
It's your identity. You have to find a new identity. At least
That's hard.
Feel like it. Yeah. And you don't see your family again. You're shamed. You know, they teach you that you will. It's hard to get past the I'm going to hell and accepting that. And you think it's going to get better. You think it's got to get better.
It's just a long
You're
road.
like, this is the last beating I will take.
Yeah.
And it's not.
I was so tired of living every day in fear. I was so tired of it. My dad would...
It's a game.
He would beat up on me frequently, and sometimes for unknown reasons. And I was just afraid all the time. And I was so tired of living in fear. And
you literally just
God. I thought
give
God
up
was the same way.
to leave.
Yeah.
Most people don't leave until they have no other choice. In order for them to survive, either because they don't want to kill themselves or be killed, that's when most people leave. Is when they're going to put a bullet in their head.
Yeah.
And they think, well, it can't be worse than that, right? So.
We're getting towards the last few minutes of the show. If there was some odd reason, quickly, if you wanted to go back for some reason, what would you have to do to go back? Would they take you back?
I would have to leave my husband and say, and one of my kids is a lot darker than the other, so I'd probably have to leave my darker kid.
Because they wouldn't take, they're very prejudiced, yeah.
My younger one's really white, so I think they would let that fly.
Do you think they'd take you back?
I think they would, yeah.
What about you?
I don't know.
I think they would take you back.
They probably would. They pretend they will. But, I mean, under a lot of circumstances, my brother says it's really hard to come back, but I would never want to go back. So
that's why I said if.
It's, yeah.
So
I mean, I've thought about what I would do if, like, I went back, or I've even dreamed about it, like in...
It's a nightmare, huh?
Yeah, I dreamed that I'm at their school and I'm who I am now, and they're trying to give me these brainwashing things and stuff, and I'm just like, no, that's not true. No.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate your sharing so candidly with us, and it's going to help a lot of people, believe me. My closing comments, I would like to talk about a recent purchase I made at the post office, a roll of postage stamps, and when I opened up the roll to begin using them, you can imagine my surprise when I saw that these stamps are celebrating 4 protections that our country provides for its citizens. And my mind immediately went to members of polygamy groups and realized how sad it is that they are exempt from these 4 protections. And they are freedom, liberty, equality, and justice. And those born in Mormon fundamentalist polygamy groups cannot expect to enjoy their rights for freedom, liberty, equality, or justice. We didn't ask to be born to a polygamous family, and we didn't grow up and then join a polygamy group of our own free will. It wasn't our choice. And if you're a female born in a polygamy group, there is no freedom. Liberty is non-existence. Equality is an unknown experience, and so is justice. It's sad. It's not only sad, it's outrageous. It's not only outrageous, it is scandalous that the United States government and the various individual state and local governments do not protect this segment of citizens. They know there's abuse in polygamy groups. They know there's fraud and incest and trafficking and child rape and child labor and welfare fraud, and nothing is done about it. Absolutely nothing. These postage stamps indeed do declare some great things about our country, but they're not extended to those unfortunate enough to having been born in a polygamy group. Now, we do thank God that Jesus sets us free. He sets us free from oppression and religious law that leads people to hell instead of to heaven. And we pray that we, the people of the United States, will garner enough integrity to insist upon equal protection of all of its citizens and stop ignoring polygamy. Its abuses are inherent, especially against women and children. And if we remain silent, it'll get worse, not better. So step up, say something, speak out, insist that our government protect all of its citizens equally, including polygamists. And those who want to legalize polygamy and make it a part of our cultural choices, you need to go and study other countries where polygamy is legal and note the demeaning treatment of the women there. In India, a man who's old enough to be the great-grandfather of a child in puberty can legally marry her. A man can take a plural wife and not tell his wife that he's got other wives, and he can remove any of his wives anytime he pleases, and the law is always on his side, never on the woman's side, and she has no recourse. Those who want to legalize polygamy need to check these things out thoroughly. And you need to know too that God is for monogamy. He has never been an advocate of polygamy, truly. Good night.